The warning alarms screamed across 12 star systems at once. Emergency broadcasts flooded every communication channel in the Galactic Empire. Military fleets scrambled from their stations, their captains barking orders with voices tight with tension. In the Grand Council chamber on the Imperial Grand Station, representatives from 47 species gathered in a chaos of movement and sound. A new species had achieved faster-than-light travel. They were approaching Imperial space right now. Supreme Chancellor Vexthor stood at the center of the crystalline chamber, his forearms spread wide in a gesture meant to command silence. The towering insectoid leader of the Galactic Empire had seen this moment dozens of times before. First contact always followed the same pattern. The newcomers would arrive full of fear or aggression. They would see the might of the Empire and either submit or be crushed. Simple, predictable, efficient. Activate the intimidation protocols, Vexthor commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Prepare the display of conquered worlds. Ready the military formations. These humans must understand their place in the galactic order from the very beginning. Around the chamber, representatives nodded their various heads, stalks, and sensor arrays. The Kreth warriors, massive beings of crystalline armor and pure aggression, flexed their combat appendages eagerly. The Mind Lords, floating in their meditation spheres, extended their telepathic presence to create an atmosphere of overwhelming mental pressure. Everything was ready. Everything was as it should be. The human ship arrived exactly on schedule. It was a curious vessel, chunky and functional rather than elegant. It looked like something built by engineers who cared more about whether something worked than whether it looked impressive. The ship docked without incident, and security scans revealed 20 humans aboard. The Empire's sensors noted their biological statistics with mild interest. Carbon-based bilateral symmetry, single-minded consciousness, ordinary, unremarkable. Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped off the human ship and looked around the docking bay with the expression of someone who had seen better. She was a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, wearing what appeared to be a simple formal suit. Behind her, the rest of the human delegation filed out, looking around with casual interest. One of them was checking his phone. Another was asking someone about bathroom locations. The Imperial Reception Committee stood in full ceremonial formation. 50 of the Empire's finest warriors and diplomats arranged in a pattern designed to inspire maximum awe and fear. They had practiced this formation for decades. It had brought countless species to their knees. Ambassador Chen walked past them while talking to her assistant. Did anyone grab the datapads from the ship? I don't want to forget them again like we did at the UN meeting last month. Her assistant, a younger man named David, nodded while juggling several bags. Got them. Also, do you think they have coffee here? The stuff on the ship tastes like burned plastic. Supreme Chancellor Vexthor stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human delegation. He began the traditional speech, the one that had been perfected over thousands of years. His voice boomed with power and authority. Behold, you stand before the Galactic Empire, the mightiest civilization in known space. We have conquered 10,000 worlds. Our fleets number in the millions. Our technology is beyond your comprehension. You will now witness the glory and power that awaits those who— Excuse me, Ambassador Chen interrupted, holding up one hand. Sorry to cut in, but do you validate parking? Our ship is in Dock 7, and we weren't sure if we needed to pay or if this is covered under the diplomatic visit thing. Vexthor stopped mid-speech. In 3,000 years of first contact protocols, no one had ever interrupted the opening declaration of power. What? Parking validation, Chen repeated patiently. Also, how long is this going to take? We have dinner reservations at 6, and I'd really hate to miss them. We heard there's this great noodle place in the station's commercial sector. The Supreme Chancellor felt something he had not experienced in centuries: confusion. He looked at his advisors. They looked back at him, equally baffled. The Mind Lords attempted to project their telepathic pressure onto the human ambassador, trying to induce the proper sense of awe and submission. Chen blinked. Is anyone else feeling a weird pressure in their sinuses, or is it just me? The air circulation on this station might need adjusting. One of the Mind Lords made a choking sound and retreated back into his meditation sphere. Vexthor decided to proceed with the protocol. Perhaps humans simply processed information differently. He gestured to the massive holographic displays that now lit up the docking bay. Images of conquered worlds appeared, showing the military might of the Empire. Fleets of warships stretching across star systems, ground forces numbering in the billions, weapons capable of destroying planets. The human delegation watched politely. One of them, a military officer judging by her uniform, leaned over to Chen. Their ship formations are pretty standard. We saw similar tactics in the wargame simulations last year. The weapons look impressive, though, Chen admitted, although those planet crackers seem wildly impractical. The energy requirements must be insane. Vex Thor's voice grew louder, more desperate. You see before you the power that has brought order to the galaxy. Species across 1,000 star systems bow before our might. Your world, Earth, must now join the Empire. You must swear loyalty to— Yeah, okay, Chen said, nodding. Sure, where do we sign? The entire chamber fell silent. Even the translation devices seemed confused, running the human words through their processors multiple times to make sure they had heard correctly. You agree? Vexthor managed. Yeah, sure, whatever, Chen said, pulling out a datapad. Look, we read through the Imperial Charter on the flight over. Seems reasonable enough. You provide security. We follow basic laws. Everyone trades and shares technology. Pretty standard Federation stuff. Earth's government already approved joining, assuming the terms matched what was advertised. So let's sign the paperwork and get to the actually interesting part. The interesting part? Vexthor felt like he was losing control of reality itself. Yeah, the trade agreements and cultural exchange programs, Chen said, her eyes lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. We're really excited about accessing your databases on xenobiology, and our scientists are dying to compare notes on FTL theory. Oh, and the art exchange program sounds amazing. We brought some Earth music and literature to share. She gestured to David, who was pulling up files on his datapad. We've got everything from classical symphonies to modern rock. Some Shakespeare, some contemporary novels, and we're hoping to get access to your culinary databases. We have this whole community of chefs back home who are super excited about alien ingredients. The Supreme Chancellor looked at his advisors. They looked back at him with expressions that roughly translated to, "We have no idea what is happening." One of the Kreth warriors, unable to contain himself, stepped forward. His voice was a growl of pure aggression. You do not fear the Empire? You do not tremble before our might? Chen looked at him with polite interest. Should we? I mean, no offense, but we're not really the trembling type. Earth's been through 6 mass extinction events, 2 world wars, and we nearly blew ourselves up 3 times during the Cold War. We're kind of hard to impress at this point. She smiled, and somehow that smile was more unsettling than any threat. But we're really excited to be here. This is going to be a great partnership. Now, about those signatures? Supreme Chancellor Vexthor realized, with a sinking feeling in his primary digestive tract, that the galaxy was about to change in ways he could not possibly predict. The humans had arrived, and they had brought something the Empire had never encountered before. Complete and utter fearlessness born from simple, exhausted experience. He pulled up the digital contract with a shaking hand. Very well. Sign here. Ambassador Chen signed with a flourish, then looked around at the assembled representatives. Great. Now seriously, does anyone know where we can get some decent coffee around here? The Imperial inspection team gathered in the briefing room aboard their survey ship, reviewing the files on Earth one final time before their descent. The team consisted of representatives from 5 different species, all chosen for their expertise in evaluating newly contacted civilizations. They had done this hundreds of times before. It was routine work, except the preliminary reports were strange. There must be an error in the planetary classification system, said Observer Krell, a 4-eyed being from the water world of Aquaria. He tapped his datapad with a webbed finger. This says Earth is rated as a Class 12 death world. That cannot be correct, agreed Military Assessor Throck, a massive Kreth warrior. Humans achieved space travel. They have art, culture, and complex social structures. No species from a Class 12 world has ever developed civilization. They are too busy surviving. Class 12 death worlds were the worst of the worst. Extreme temperature variations, toxic atmosphere pockets, violent weather patterns, predatory megafauna, deadly microorganisms, and geological instability. Most species use them as military training grounds or mining operations with heavy automation. Nobody lived on them by choice. Chief Observer Zinta, a floating crystalline being with sensors that could detect 1,000 different environmental factors, rechecked the data. The classification is correct. I ran it through the system 3 times. Earth scores a 12.4 on the habitability index. By our standards, it should be uninhabitable. Then how did humans evolve there? Asked Krell. Zinta's crystal structure flickered with colors that indicated deep confusion. I do not know. We are about to find out. The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, and the inspection team immediately understood the problem. The planet was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green continents. White clouds swirling in patterns that spoke of active weather systems. It looked like a paradise garden world. Then they checked the actual conditions. The atmospheric oxygen content is 21%, Krell read, his voice rising with alarm. That is poison. Oxygen is corrosive. How are they breathing this? The temperature range varies by 70 degrees Celsius between seasons in some regions, added Throck, reading his own scanner. The weather patterns include rotating vortexes of wind that can destroy buildings. The tectonic plates are highly active. There are over 1,500 active volcanic sites. The native fauna includes apex predators with bite forces exceeding 10,000 newtons, Zinta continued, cycling through the biological data. Microorganisms that cause hundreds of fatal diseases, plants that produce toxins capable of killing most galactic species, and the humans evolved alongside all of this. They landed in a city called Seattle, on the North American continent. The human liaison, a cheerful young woman named Jennifer, met them at the landing pad wearing nothing but thin fabric coverings. It was raining and the temperature was 15 degrees Celsius. Welcome to Earth, Jennifer said brightly, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. The inspection team stood in their full environmental suits, climate-controlled and filtered. They had brought enough supplies to survive for a week in this hostile environment. Jennifer was just standing there in the rain smiling. Are you not cold? Krell asked through his suit's speaker. Jennifer looked confused. This is perfect weather. Maybe a little chilly, but it's nice. Good day for a walk. The inspection team exchanged looks of horror. Over the following days, they documented everything with growing disbelief. They watched humans jogging through weather that would hospitalize most species. They saw children playing in temperatures that ranged from freezing to blazing hot, often on the same day. They observed humans eating foods that contained compounds toxic to 80% of known galactic life. That substance is capsaicin, Zinta said, watching a human eat something called a pepper. It triggers pain receptors. It is literally a chemical weapon. They eat it for fun, Jennifer explained. Some people grow the hottest peppers they can find just to challenge themselves. There are competitions. The visit to the beach was particularly traumatic. The inspection team watched as humans voluntarily exposed themselves to the planet's yellow star, which emitted dangerous levels of radiation. They swam in water containing countless microorganisms. Children built structures in the sand while creatures called seagulls, aggressive avian predators, swooped overhead. That small human just got stung by a venomous creature, Throck said, pointing at a child who had stepped on a jellyfish. Should we alert medical services? Oh, Tommy will be fine, said a human parent nearby, a woman with a calm expression. It's just a jellyfish sting. Happens all the time. We'll put some vinegar on it. Tommy was crying but walking. The parent applied a common food preservative to the wound, and within minutes the child was playing again. The inspection team needed to sit down, but the real shock came when Jennifer took them to observe human military training. The Empire had wanted to assess human combat capabilities, so they visited a Marine Corps base. Military Assessor Throck had insisted on this visit. He wanted to see how soft these Death World humans really were. The base commander, a woman named Colonel Morrison, greeted them warmly. Welcome. We've set up a demonstration of our basic training course. Nothing fancy, just the standard stuff our recruits go through. The obstacle course looked difficult but manageable by Imperial standards. Walls to climb, barriers to cross, simulated combat environments. The inspection team had seen similar courses across the galaxy. Then the human soldiers started running it. They moved fast, not just physically fast, but with a speed of decision-making that seemed almost reckless. They climbed walls without hesitation, jumped gaps that should have required careful calculation, and adapted to obstacles on the fly. And they did it all while carrying equipment that weighed 30 kilograms. What is their completion time? Throck asked, his warrior pride stinging. Average is about 12 minutes, Colonel Morrison said, though the record is 9 minutes 42 seconds set by Sergeant Chen last year. Throck pulled up the Imperial military database. The Empire's elite warriors completed similar courses in about 15 minutes, and they trained for years to achieve that. These were human basics. I would like to attempt the course, Throck announced suddenly. Colonel Morrison raised an eyebrow. In that environmental suit? It must weigh twice what our gear weighs. I am a Kreth warrior. I have trained since birth for combat. I will demonstrate Imperial superiority. Morrison shrugged. Okay. Want us to adjust anything for your biology? No adjustments necessary. Throck started the course. He was strong, well-trained, and confident. He made it halfway through before his environmental suit's cooling system started to fail. The Earth's atmosphere, the gravity, the temperature variations, all of it combined into an exhausting assault on his systems. He finished in 28 minutes and collapsed at the end, gasping for air. A human grandmother was visiting the base to watch her grandson graduate from training. She was at least 60 years old by human standards. She looked at the course, then at her grandson. Is this what you've been doing, Tommy? It doesn't look that hard. Grandma, no, Tommy said, alarmed. Grandma Martha was already at the starting line. She completed the course in 14 minutes and 53 seconds, beating Throck's personal record from his home world. She did complain about her knees hurting afterward, but she was smiling. Throck had an existential crisis and had to be sedated. That evening, the inspection team sat in their ship, compiling their report. None of them knew quite what to write. They evolved through constant survival pressure. Zinta said finally. Their planet tried to kill them every single day. They did not conquer their world through superiority. They simply refused to die. They think this is normal, Krell added, still processing everything. They consider these conditions comfortable. What the Empire calls a death world, they call home. What do we tell the Council? Asked Throck, who had recovered but seemed diminished somehow. Zinta's crystalline structure pulsed with colors that indicated deep thought. We tell them the truth. Humans are not impressive because they are stronger or smarter than other species. They are impressive because they evolved in conditions that would kill most of us within hours. They have been training for survival since before they could walk. The Empire's intimidation tactics will not work on them, because fear is not effective on a species that learned to laugh at danger just to cope with their daily lives. The report was filed. Within days, it spread across the Empire's networks. Species that had spent centuries in awe of imperial power read about humans with growing fascination. The mighty warriors who had conquered star systems learned that a human grandmother could beat their best soldiers while complaining about arthritis. The galaxy was starting to realize something profound. The Empire had built its power on being the strongest, the most advanced, the most fearsome. But humans had built their civilization on something else entirely, on stubbornness, on persistence, on the absolute refusal to give up no matter what the universe threw at them, and that many species were beginning to understand might be far more powerful than any weapon. The Imperial Trade Conclave met once every lunar cycle in a grand chamber, designed to showcase the magnificence of galactic commerce. The chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in precise hierarchical order. Every species had their designated position, carefully calculated based on their economic contribution, military strength, and political influence. The meetings followed protocols established over 3,000 years, with each step of negotiation carefully choreographed. Ambassador Sarah. Chen walked into her first trade conclave meeting carrying a box of donuts and a large container of coffee. Morning, everyone, she said cheerfully, setting the box on the central negotiation platform. I brought snacks. Hope nobody's allergic to wheat or sugar. The trade master, a being named Quillix from the commerce world of Meridian, stared at the donuts with 3 of his 5 eyes. His mandibles clicked in confusion. Ambassador Chen, we have not yet completed the opening rituals of commerce. You cannot simply— Right, sorry, Chen said, sitting down in the human-designated seat. It was positioned in the back corner, the traditional spot for new members with minimal influence. She pulled out her datapad. So what are we covering today? Quillix's face turned a color that his species displayed when experiencing stress. We must first acknowledge the commerce spirits, then recite the 100 principles of fair trade, then— How long does all that take? Chen asked. Approximately 4 hours. And then we start actual negotiations? Correct. The negotiation process for a standard trade agreement follows 47 distinct steps, each with its own protocols. A typical trade agreement takes 6 months to finalize. Chen looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Does anyone actually like doing it this way? Silence. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. One small being from a minor species made a sound that might have been a laugh before quickly covering it with a cough. The protocols are sacred, Quillick said firmly. They have been perfected over millennia. They ensure fairness and prevent chaos. Right, Chen said, nodding. But what if we just talked about what we want and found a compromise? You know, like a conversation? That would be... Quillick struggled to find the word. Improper, chaotic, wrong, Chen smiled. Tell you what, let's try it my way for one meeting. If it's a disaster, we go back to your way. Deal? Before Quillick could respond, Chen pulled up a holographic display. Okay, so Earth wants access to your medical database, specifically information on biological engineering. In exchange, we're offering our agricultural techniques and entertainment media. We've got thousands of years of music, movies, books, and art that we think other species might enjoy. We're also willing to share some manufacturing processes that could be useful. A representative from the industrial world of Forge 9, a robotic being named Unit 7743, leaned forward. Your manufacturing processes interest us. Our analysts have studied your techniques. They are unusual but efficient. Great, Chen said. What do you need? We require rare earth elements for our production facilities. Our primary supplier has increased prices by 30%. We've got those on Earth. We can provide them at 15% below your current price if you share your automated construction blueprints. Unit 7743 ran calculations. Acceptable. But we would also like access to your entertainment media. Our creators found human music to be stimulating. Chen grinned. Done. I'll throw in a complete collection of Earth's greatest hits. Anyone else? What followed was chaos by imperial standards, but remarkably productive by human ones. Representatives started talking directly to each other, bypassing the formal protocols entirely. They made deals, formed partnerships, and solved problems that had been stuck in bureaucratic limbo for years. The small species in the back, usually ignored in formal proceedings, suddenly had voices because Chen kept asking their opinions. You're from an agricultural world, right? Chen asked a timid representative from a planet called Green 3. What do you think about this soil treatment process? The representative, shocked at being addressed directly, stammered out a response. It turned out Green 3 had developed an incredible fertilizer that nobody had paid attention to, because they were too small to matter in formal negotiations. Within 20 minutes, 5 different worlds had signed agreements to buy it. 4 hours later, they had completed work that should have taken 6 months. Quillick sat at his position, his datapad filled with finalized agreements, looking like his entire worldview had just collapsed. This should not have worked, he muttered. But it did, Chen said, packing up her things. The donuts were gone. Several species had discovered they quite liked Earth pastries. Sometimes the old ways are old because they're good. Sometimes they're just old. See you next month? The news of the Trade Conclave incident spread like wildfire through imperial networks. Ambassador Chen became simultaneously the most loved and most controversial figure in galactic politics. Traditional powers were scandalized. Smaller species were thrilled. And humans had set a precedent that was impossible to undo. Meanwhile, human military integration was causing its own disruptions. Commander Jake Williams stood in the Imperial Fleet Command Center, reviewing the defensive positions for the upcoming joint military exercise. The exercise simulated defending a border world from pirate raiders, a standard training scenario used for centuries. The defense plan is solid, said Fleet Admiral Xanth, a Kreth warrior with decades of experience. We establish a perimeter here, position heavy ships in formation Delta 7 and wait for the raiders to attack. Standard Imperial doctrine. Right, Jake said slowly. But what if instead of waiting we just didn't tell them where we are? Excuse me? Stealth approach. We position our ships behind this moon, power down to minimal signatures, and wait. When the raiders come through, we hit them from the side. They won't know we're there until it's too late. Admiral Xanth's face showed confusion. That is not honorable combat. No, Jake agreed. But it's effective, and nobody dies. Pirates deserve honorable combat like any warrior. Pirates are criminals trying to steal stuff and hurt people. I don't really care about their honor. I care about stopping them with minimum casualties on both sides. The argument went back and forth until finally, Jake suggested they try both approaches and see which worked better. The Imperial fleet would use standard doctrine. The human fleet would try Jake's approach. The exercise began. The Imperial fleet established their perimeter, ships in perfect formation, broadcasting their position as honorable warriors should. The simulated pirates engaged them in a straight fight. It was glorious, dramatic, and resulted in 40% casualties on the defending side. The human fleet hid behind a moon. When the pirates arrived at the human sector, they found nothing. They spread out to search, confused and disorganized. The humans ambushed them from 3 directions at once, disabled their engines with precision fire, and captured the entire raider fleet without firing a single fatal shot. Total casualties 0. The exercise observers reviewed the data 3 times. They could not argue with the results, but it felt wrong somehow. War was supposed to be glorious. It was supposed to be about honor and strength, not hiding and ambushing. But the younger officers were paying attention. They were asking questions. If humans could win without anyone dying, why were they still using tactics that got people killed? The cultural impact of human integration went deeper than trade or military tactics. It went to the very foundation of how the Empire maintained control. The Empire ruled through fear and hierarchy. Everyone knew their place. Everyone understood that the Empire was powerful and that rebellion meant destruction. Then humans arrived and simply refused to be afraid. A minor species called the Ven, small reptilian beings from a low-gravity world, had lived under imperial rule for 2 centuries. They paid heavy taxes, followed strict regulations, and accepted their position at the bottom of the hierarchy. They had tried to negotiate better terms a few times, but the Empire always refused. After all, the Ven were weak. They had no leverage. Then the Ven ambassador met Ambassador Chen at a diplomatic reception. They talked about art and culture. Chen was genuinely interested in Ven music, which was complex and beautiful. She asked questions. She listened. "Why do you accept such unfavorable trade terms?" Chen asked casually, reviewing the Ven's treaty with the Empire. "We have no choice," the Ven ambassador replied. "We are too small to matter. If we protest too much, the Empire might decide we are more trouble than we are worth." Chen frowned. "That seems like a bluff to me. The Empire needs you more than you think. You produce rare crystals that are essential for FTL drives. If you stopped supplying them, a lot of ships would be grounded. But the Empire has military power. They could take the crystals by force, and could they? That would require occupying your world, which costs money and resources. Plus, forced labor is way less efficient than willing workers. And from what I've seen, the Empire is all about efficiency." Chen smiled. "You've got more leverage than you think. You just have to be willing to use it." 3 months later, the Ven renegotiated their treaty. They did not threaten or demand. They simply stated calmly and politely that they wanted better terms. When the Empire pushed back, the Ven pointed out the same things Chen had mentioned. The emergency broadcast reached every corner of the Galactic Empire simultaneously. On thousands of worlds across hundreds of species, the same message played. Ancient. Terrible. Final. The Devourer fleet had returned. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thor stood in the council chamber as chaos erupted around him. Representatives were shouting, some in their native languages that the translators struggled to process. The Mind Lords were broadcasting waves of telepathic panic. Even the normally stoic Kreth warriors looked shaken. The Devourers were not just an enemy. They were the enemy. The ancient threat that had forced the fractured species of the galaxy to unite 3,000 years ago. They came from beyond the galactic rim, a fleet of massive ships that consumed entire civilizations. They ate resources, technology, and biological matter with equal hunger. They left nothing behind but empty husks of worlds. Last time, the Empire had barely survived. They had thrown every ship, every weapon, every warrior at the Devourer fleet. They had fought with such desperation that entire species had gone extinct in the war. In the end, the Devourers had been driven back but not destroyed. They had simply left, retreating beyond the rim, waiting. Now they had returned, and the galaxy remembered its fear. The prophecies spoke of this, intoned Elder Seer Vixia, an ancient being who claimed to see possible futures. The Devourers return when the Empire shows weakness. We have been divided. We have questioned our ways. We have allowed chaos into our order. This is punishment for our failure. This is not about prophecy, Vexthor said, trying to maintain control. This is about survival. We must mobilize every fleet. Every world must contribute forces. We must show unity as we did 3,000 years ago. And what of the humans? Asked a council member. They are new to the galaxy. They do not understand what we face. They will learn, Vexthor said grimly. Everyone learns fear when they face the Devourers. The emergency summons reached Earth within the hour. Ambassador Chen received the message while having breakfast in her apartment on the Imperial Grand Station. She read through the data while eating toast, then called her military liaison. Commander Williams, we've got a situation. Can you get the team together for a briefing in 30 minutes? 30 minutes later, the human delegation sat in their conference room, reviewing the information about the Devourer fleet. Admiral Rodriguez, the senior human military officer assigned to Imperial space, studied the tactical data with interest. So these Devourers, she said, scrolling through the files. They're a nomadic civilization that consumes resources from other species. Fleet-based, highly advanced, extremely aggressive, last seen 3,000 years ago. The Empire is in full panic mode, Chen added. They're preparing for what they're calling the final stand. Very dramatic. Lots of speeches about honor and sacrifice. What's our assessment? Rodriguez asked her analysts. Lieutenant Park, a young officer with a background in xenobiology, pulled up her report. The Devourer technology is impressive but not impossible to counter. Their ships are large and powerful but appear to rely on straightforward tactics. They seem to operate with a hive mind structure, which makes them coordinated but potentially inflexible. Their resource consumption suggests they have supply line vulnerabilities. So they're scary but not invincible, Rodriguez summarized. Correct. I'd classify this as a serious threat, but manageable with proper strategy. Chen looked at the group. The Empire expects us to be terrified. What's the actual human response going to be? Rodriguez thought for a moment. We form a committee to review options. We run simulations. We prepare reasonable contingency plans. Standard response to a large-scale threat. Should we evacuate Earth? Someone asked. Rodriguez shook her head. Not immediately. Let's see what we're actually dealing with first. No point in panicking before we have solid information. Chen smiled. So our official response to the ancient terror that destroyed civilizations is to schedule some meetings and wait for more data? Pretty much, yeah. The contrast between the human response and the galactic response could not have been more stark. While the Empire prepared monuments and final testaments, humans prepared spreadsheets and battle simulations. While other species gave speeches about glorious last stands, humans asked technical questions about the Devourer's supply logistics. Ambassador Chen attended an Imperial War Council, where every species was supposed to pledge their forces for the coming battle. The atmosphere was heavy with doom. Species were volunteering their entire military forces, knowing they would likely be destroyed. Some were already composing death songs. When it was Earth's turn to speak, Chen stood up. Humanity pledges its full support in defending the Empire. We're committing our entire First Fleet, along with tactical support teams and research personnel. There were murmurs of approval. Then Chen continued. But before we start planning this glorious last stand, has anyone tried talking to them? The chamber fell silent. Excuse me? Vexthor said. The Devourers. Has anyone tried communicating with them? Negotiating? Finding out what they actually want? They are Devourers, Vexthor said, as if the name explained everything. They consume. They destroy. There is nothing to negotiate. But why? Chen pressed. They're an intelligent species with advanced technology. They must have reasons for what they do. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe they're fleeing something worse. Maybe they just don't know there are other options. They have destroyed entire civilizations. So have we, Chen said bluntly. Humans have done terrible things throughout our history. We've gotten better. Maybe they can too. I'm just saying, before we start a war that might kill billions, maybe we should at least try talking first. The suggestion was rejected as naive and foolish. The Devourers were beyond reasoning. Everyone knew this. It was established fact, but the human delegation filed the suggestion in their reports anyway. Meanwhile, Admiral Rodriguez was meeting with her tactical team, reviewing the Devourer battle strategies from the last war. Commander Williams stood at the holographic display pointing out patterns. They fight like a hammer, he said, Overwhelming force, straight-line attacks, crushing anything in their path. It's effective but predictable. The Empire matches them force for force, Rodriguez noted. They line up their fleets, clash in massive battles, winner takes all. Very traditional. Very stupid, added Lieutenant Park. You don't fight a hammer by being an anvil. You dodge the hammer and hit it from the side. They spent the next several days running simulations, testing different approaches. The Imperial officers assigned to work with them watched with growing concern as humans proposed tactics that violated every principle of honorable warfare. You want to lure them into a nebula and ambush them? Captain Thex, a Kreeth officer, asked in disbelief. That is cowardly. That's smart, Williams corrected. The nebula interferes with their sensors. They'll be blind and disoriented. We can disable their ships without even being seen. War is not about hiding. It is about strength meeting strength. Williams looked at him seriously. War is about winning and going home alive. Everything else is just ego. The human proposals were radical by Imperial standards. Guerrilla tactics instead of fleet battles. Target their supply lines instead of their main forces. Use the environment as a weapon. Prioritize survival over glory. Fight smart instead of hard. The Imperial High Command reviewed the human strategies with horror. These tactics had no honor, no glory. They were underhanded and sneaky and effective. Disturbingly effective. If we adopt these strategies, we lose what makes us the Empire, argued Military Commander Thorax. We become cowards who hide and strike from shadows. If we don't adapt, we become extinct, Rodriguez replied simply. Your call. The debate raged for weeks as the Devourer fleet drew closer. They were moving slowly, methodically, consuming resources from uninhabited systems as they advanced. The Empire tracked their progress with growing dread. Then something unexpected happened. A human research vessel, against all orders and common sense, approached the edge of Devourer space and began broadcasting a message. Not a threat, not a challenge. A simple greeting in mathematical language. Hello. We are humans from the planet Earth. We wish to communicate. The Empire was furious. The humans had potentially doomed them all by drawing the Devourer's attention. But the humans, characteristically, were more curious than afraid. The Devourer fleet did not respond immediately. They continued their advance. But they also did not fire on the human research vessel. They simply ignored it, which was strange. The Devourers had never ignored anything before. Ambassador Chen watched the situation develop with interest. They didn't destroy the ship. That means they're making choices. Things that make choices can be reasoned with. Or they are simply waiting to consume it later. Vexthor replied darkly. Maybe. But I don't think so. I think they're curious too. The Devourer fleet reached the border of Imperial space exactly on schedule. Every military force in the Empire was mobilized and ready. Defensive positions were established across 36 systems. Billions of beings prepared for war, many of them expecting to die. Humanity's first fleet moved to the front line. Their ships were smaller than most Imperial vessels, built for speed and maneuverability rather than raw power. The communication channel between the Devourer fleet and the human vessels crackled with quantum interference. Ambassador Chen sat at her console, aware that every species in the Empire was listening to this conversation. She was also aware that she was possibly about to start or prevent the biggest war in galactic history. No pressure. We're humans, she repeated. We're new here. Only been in space for about a century. Only found the Empire a few months ago. But we've noticed something interesting. Everyone seems really scared of you. There was a pause. Then the Devourer response came through, the translated message appearing on her screen. Fear is appropriate. We consume. We take what we need. This is our nature. Right, about that, Chen said, pulling up some data. We've been looking at your travel patterns, your resource consumption rates, and your technology. You're not just raiders. You're nomadic. You're running from something, aren't you? The silence that followed was longer this time. Tense, then. You know nothing of us. Maybe not, but we know what it's like to be desperate. Humans almost destroyed ourselves a few times. We fought wars over resources. We did terrible things because we thought we had no choice. Chen leaned forward. But we learned that there are always choices. Always other options. What if we could help you find another way? Admiral Rodriguez watched the exchange while monitoring the Devourer fleet's movements. They had stopped advancing. The massive ships hung in space, weapons powered but not targeting. Waiting. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy patterns from the lead Devourer ship," reported Lieutenant Park. "It looks like internal deliberations. They're talking among themselves." "Keep all weapons ready, but don't target anything," Rodriguez ordered. "Let's not give them a reason to start shooting." Commander Williams stood at the tactical display, studying the Devourer formation. "If this goes bad, we need to hit them fast and hard. I've got 36 scenarios ready. Let's hope we don't need them." On the Imperial command ship, Supreme Chancellor Vexthor watched the situation with disbelief. "They are conversing with the Devourers. This is madness. The Devourers do not talk. They only consume." "The humans seem to disagree," observed Zinta, the crystalline observer who had visited Earth. "Perhaps they see something we missed." "What could they possibly see?" "Desperation that mirrors their own history," Zinta said thoughtfully. "Humans evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Perhaps they recognize the behavior of beings who feel they have no choice but to take or die." The Devourer response finally came through, and for the first time, it contained something other than declarations and threats. It contained information. "Realm dies, star collapse, dimensional instability. We flee, or we cease. We require resources to continue." This is not choice. This is survival. Chen felt a surge of understanding. "You're refugees." "You're not evil. You're just trying to live. We take what we need. This is survival." "But it doesn't have to be theft," Chen said quickly. "The Empire has resources. Lots of them. What if instead of taking by force you traded for what you need? You clearly have advanced technology. There are things you could offer in exchange. The Empire fears us. They would never trade." "The Empire feared us too at first," Chen said with a slight smile. "They got over it. Look, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. Give us a chance to prove it. Give us time to work something out. And if we refuse?" Chen's voice hardened slightly. "Then we fight, and I'm not going to lie, we'll probably lose. You're bigger and stronger, but we're humans. We don't give up easy. We'll make it cost you more than you want to pay. And even if you win, you'll have made enemies of every species in the Empire. Is that really worth it when there might be another way?" The truth was, Chen had no idea if they could actually make a deal work. But she knew one thing about desperate beings. They wanted hope more than they wanted victory. The pause this time felt eternal. Rodriguez watched her tactical display, ready to give the order to engage. Williams had his finger hovering over the weapon systems. Across the galaxy, millions of beings waited. Then the Devourer fleet did something unprecedented. They powered down their weapons. "We will talk, but if this is deception, we will show no mercy." Chen let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. "No deception. Let's figure this out together." What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Humans acted as mediators between the Empire and the Devourers. It turned out the Devourers needed rare elements and exotic matter to maintain their ships and sustain their biology. The Empire had these resources but had never thought to offer them, because they had never thought to ask what the Devourers actually wanted. It also turned out the Devourers had technology that could revolutionize Imperial manufacturing, medical science, and transportation. They had developed it out of necessity, adapting to survive in the harsh space between galaxies. The negotiations took weeks. They were difficult. There was distrust on all sides. But slowly, carefully, a framework for coexistence emerged. The Empire would provide resources. The Devourers would provide technology and labor. Everyone would benefit. Of course, not everyone was happy with this peaceful resolution. A faction of Imperial hardliners led by military commander Thorax believed the Devourers could not be trusted. They plotted to sabotage the negotiations by launching a preemptive strike on the Devourer fleet. They made their move during a joint conference, when human, Imperial, and Devourer representatives were meeting on neutral ground. A group of rogue Imperial ships jumped in and opened fire on the Devourer vessels. The Devourers immediately began to retaliate, their weapons powering up. The fragile peace was seconds from shattering, and that was when humanity did what humanity does best. They improvised something absolutely insane. Admiral Rodriguez, seeing what was happening, made a split-second decision. "All ships emergency maneuver Delta 9. Execute now." The human fleet moved as one. putting themselves directly between the Imperial attackers and the Devourer fleet. They made themselves the shield, absorbing fire meant for the Devourers. Human ships took hits, their shields flaring bright as they protected beings who had been their enemies minutes ago. What are they doing? Thorax screamed from his command ship. Move aside! No, Rodriguez replied calmly over the open channel. If you want to start a war, you go through us first. Commander Williams was already moving his tactical team to intercept the rogue ships. They did not fire to kill. They fired to disable, targeting engines and weapons with surgical precision. It was the kind of combat that required incredible skill, and the humans made it look routine. Within minutes, the rogue Imperial ships were dead in space, their weapons offline, their engines cold. No one had died, but the coup attempt was over. The Devourer fleet had watched all of this in silence. Then their leader, a being called the Prime Consumer, sent a message directly to Admiral Rodriguez. You protected us. You took damage meant for us. Why? Rodriguez, standing on her damaged bridge with alarms blaring around her, smiled tiredly. Because that's what you do when you're trying to build something better than war. You take the hit so others don't have to. This is unprecedented. Yeah, well, we're humans. We do unprecedented pretty regularly. The Prime Consumer was silent for a moment. Then, we have misjudged your species, we thought. You were weak because you sought peace, but you are strong because you protect. Peace even at cost to yourselves. This is admirable. Peace treaty was signed 3 days later. The Devourers agreed to settle in a designated zone of space on the Galactic Rim, where they would help mine and process resources in exchange for what they needed to survive. They would share their technology with the Empire. They would become partners instead of enemies. It was not perfect. There were complications and disagreements and tense moments, but it worked. The Empire had been fundamentally changed by the whole experience. Supreme Chancellor Vexthor addressed the Galactic Council in a chamber that no longer felt as imposing as it once had. For 3,000 years we ruled through fear and power, he said. We believed this was the only way to maintain order. Then humans arrived and showed us something we had forgotten. There is another kind of strength. The strength to choose peace even when war seems certain. The strength to protect even those who were once enemies. The strength to try something new even when the old ways feel safe. He looked at Ambassador Chen, who was sitting in what was no longer the back corner but a position of honor. Humanity taught us that the most powerful thing in the galaxy is not the biggest weapon or the largest fleet. It is the simple refusal to accept that conflict is inevitable. Chen stood and gave a small bow. We just did what we thought was right. Also, war is really expensive and nobody wants to pay for it if there's another option. The chamber filled with a sound that would have been unthinkable months ago. Laughter. Genuine, warm laughter from dozens of species. The formal ceremony continued, but the real change had already happened. Species that had spent centuries afraid were learning to stand up for themselves. The strict hierarchies were loosening. Trade was becoming more fair. Military doctrine was evolving to prioritize strategy over glory. And humans were at the center of it all, still slightly confused about why everyone had been doing things the hard way.